What is good, everybody? This is the Deconstruction Guide, all right? In this guide, I will be showing you and teaching you how to overcome Christian gaslighting. Now, this guide is not just for people who are just currently deconstructing from Christianity. You could be an atheist and just well developed in your atheism, and you want to, sharpen that sword. You know what I'm saying? You want to sharpen up a little bit and be very aware of the tactics and rhetoric that religious people will often use against you, whether it's family members or friends or, being in a community. You could be somebody that is also a Christian and you're just a little curious. You're asking questions, and, whenever you are in a state of asking questions or in a state of being, in a way of disagreeing with your fellow, brethren and sisters, and it might drive you further away from your religion and from the church. This is what this guide is for. All right. So Christians love to gaslight. All right. So this is basically a deconstruction guide for you on that. All right. So do me a favor before we go any further. If you're watching this or if you're seeing this on social media, make sure you hit that like button. All right. If you're seeing this on Instagram, make sure you hit that like button. All right. Without further ado, let's get into it. So first and foremost, who am I, right? And mind you, like I said, this is my third time recording this. So 3 times the charm. I'm really going to try and be as short with this as possible and just get through it so that you can get to the information. All right. Because, you want to be here all day. You know what I'm saying? But you're here for the information. And that's why I'm going to give it to you. But first and foremost, who am I, right? I am the Omnius Roan, but also formerly known as Tyrone Walker. All right. Now, just to give you a little background, you can read this, you can pause that and read that for yourself. But basically, I am somebody who was fervently raised up into the church. I was a fervent Christian. I was somebody on both sides of my family. Both sides of the family were deeply and are deeply into the faith. Both grandparents are and were leaders of the deacon board. Okay. Grandma and granddaddy on both sides were leader of the deacon board and deaconesses. My dad is in the choir currently, dad in the choir, and then my mom being a financial advisor for her church. And I was destined to be a minister. I was a fervent, faithful Christian, Jesus freak, Bible thumper to the core. All right. Ain't nobody could tell me anything otherwise about Jesus. Okay. So I want people to be very aware that I'm coming at this from a place where people can understand this, as a person who used to be in it. All right. I was in it to win it. Matter of fact, some of y'all may not believe me when I say that I was in it to win it. Cause you really need to see this. I was in it to win it. Okay. There was no plan about it. All right. You could not play with me by Jesus. You see that big old cross around my neck. Okay. You see I still have that Bible to this day. I still have those bookmarks to this day. To this day, I still have those bookmarks. I still have that Bible. All right. I was a Jesus freak to the core. All right. So just to give you a little background on this, right? I was a fervent, faithful Christian. I started like my little ministry back when I was like 12 or 13 years old. I was on Glogster. I was just really getting into it and everything like that. Like had my own little virtual ministry. I was getting thousands of views. I was in it, right? Praying for people, had my own little community on virtually and stuff like that. And then something happened drastically into my life around like 15 years old, fell back out of religion. And then I started studying more into like consciousness, black consciousness. And that's when like the pro-black movement was really getting up there and the whole woke movement was going on social media. And then around like when I was 17 years old, I still kind of was leaning towards Christianity. But see, I didn't see God I was like, well, Jesus ain't white, so he got to be like black. So then I blackified it. But then, I started studying a little bit more and more and more, and just things just started not to really make any type of sense. And then one day I decided to do a little more of a deep dive, right? So I had friends around me that were telling me about how, it was through the plantation that Christianity was given to us, right? So I had to do my own little research. I'm like, well, I ain't never heard that before, right? So I did my own little research, and there was this book called How to Make the Negro Christian, right? And basically that was a book that was inspired by the religious instruction. Matter of fact, I'm going to Google it right now. It's a book that was created, that was inspired by this particular structure called the religious instructions. There it is. Right here. The religious instruction of the Negroes in the United States. Right. And so basically, this was created by Charles Colcock, I believe that's how you say that, Jones Sr. And this was published in 1843. Okay. And so this basically gives you a little bit of the rundown on how Christianity was instilled in black people. All right. He was a minister and he was a plantation owner. So that book inspired a book that was created by a black man called How to Make the Negro Christian. And so they emphasize even more on the basis of how our ancestors were given Christianity to make them subservient, and also to Christianize us and to get rid of our identity and to get rid of our spiritual practices. And even today, like if you talk to the average black person, like about witchcraft or even voodoo or hoodoo, like they are truly spooked out about it. They don't want to talk anything close to the basis of that conversation. And so when I came to an understanding about that, like when I really conceived that, like, oh wow, like the only reason why I am Christian is because this was given to me to suppress my very nature. So I gave that up real quick, you know, but we're going to get more into the basis of my deconstruction a little bit in this video. Of course, I have a YouTube video about that as well. So if you want to, you know, find that YouTube video and you want to look through that, I have that linked in the description box below. All right. But yes, I was in it to win it. You could see the big cross. You could see the Bible. I mean, the truth speaks for itself, and you better ask about me. All right. If you ever come across somebody that I ever went to school with, they would tell you I'm talking about I was in middle school reading the Bible, bro. Every morning, going into my classes, reading the Bible. Every morning I would read it, and before I go to bed, I would read it. Okay, so I was about it. I don't care what nobody or any Christian try to tell me about myself. So let's make some disclaimers as well. When it comes to the basis of religion and Christianity, something that needs to be pointed out is that I'm not here to slander your beliefs. I'm not here to slander your faith. I'm not here to slander your Jesus Christ, how you perceive Jesus Christ. I have high respects for the story of Jesus Christ, and I have high respects for the teachings of Jesus Christ. All right. I just do not take the story literal. I truly uphold mythology for what it is, and that's to guide you on your internal path. And I love this picture here because it shows you the union between Mary Magdalene and Jesus Christ. So just very beautiful, right? And the purpose for this deconstruction guide, and the reason why I'm doing like a little bit of a preview or like a prequel to basically what I'm going to show you at the very end of this deconstruction guide, what I have for you is that I want to make this guide as if I am talking to my 17-year-old self. Okay, because I know there's a lot of people out there who have never been given the space to be outspoken about these different things. And even more so, like now that now that TikTok is gone, TikTok was a very powerful platform that was given to people that, were deconstructing or who were questioning their faith. There was just a lot of stuff going on through the algorithm that, people out there could put stuff out there and you could learn and study from different people and all these different things. So that was just very, it's unfortunate that TikTok is gone now. But who knows, you could be watching this and they already brought TikTok back, but it's January 19th that I'm recording this, and that's exactly what happened. But show must go on. Now that TikTok is gone, maybe you come across this, this platform, and you come across this guide, and, now you have a new space. You feel me? So let's move on. Okay, so let me run it by you real quick. I am going to be giving you 4 simple ways, or 4 simple techniques, 4 different rhetorics that Christians will, say to you, things that they will try to do in terms of excusing your, experience, or things that you say, whatever the case is. And so there are technically 10 techniques that I've created, that I've analyzed, and how you deal with gaslighting, and 10 rhetorics that they will try to give to you as well, when it concerns, your deconstruction from Christianity. However, to save our time, I'm only going to deal with 4. All right. So that you can just conceive these, and it can, come into your mind, and you can let it marinate in there. All right. So I'm giving you 4 simple ways on how you can overcome being gaslighted and voluntarily misunderstood. So first and foremost, we need to know what the heck is gaslighting. What is Christian gaslighting, right? Well, Christian gaslighting, and let me move my big head over here. Christian gaslighting is a form of emotional and spiritual manipulation where someone makes you doubt your beliefs, experience, or reality to maintain control or reinforce religious doctrine. All right. So what you need to understand here is that Christian gaslighting is a form of, it's a structure, it's a tactic that is used against people who are questioning Christianity, and is to try and bring somebody, pull them against how do I word this? Like, put them in a corner, have them ruffle up against the ropes. And this is a tactic that is oftentimes used to try and see if, like, okay, like, let's see if you really got heart. and some people just, they fall back into the religion because they don't want to, cause too much disruption in their family. It's just a plethora of things, So it's really used to maintain control and reinforce that religious doctrine that is instilled in your subconscious mind. It's truly beyond me. So the first column, dismissing your doubts. So you might be confused, or rather, this is what they would tell you. They would tell you that you are just confused. You just talk a lot of stuff. You know what I'm saying? You don't really know what you're talking about. So you just need to get back into good relations with Jesus. Just call him up and tell him what you want. Like, you need to go back there, right? So the first tactic that they may use against you is basically dismissing your doubts, right? So they'll say something like, oh, you're just confused. You might be a little discombobulated. I think you might be misunderstanding some things. You haven't really done enough research. I think you just need to, you're a little disconnected. You need to get back in touch with Jesus. You just need to get back in union with Jesus. Call him up and tell him what you want. It's a Negro spiritual, I believe. Something I used to hear back in the church, right? But this statement is somehow, it doesn't lead you anywhere, because they're not leading you to any type of real sources. They're not really having a real conversation with you about what exactly you're going through. They're kind of they're really dismissing your feelings, and they are dismissing your doubts. And this tactic makes you question your ability to think critically and to trust your own thoughts, right? And that's basically what you see in the church, is that there's no real development of self-thought, right? There's no real, and I can't speak for all churches, but for most churches, they do not instill or tell you, like, basically instilling, like, critical thinking. Critical thinking is detrimental to the church system. You do not, and they will tell you in the church, like, we lean not on our own understanding. That's exactly what they teach in the church. We do not lean on our own understanding. And they say that out of context for the scripture, but even more so, they say that so that you won't trust your thoughts. You won't trust your critical thinking skills. You can use your critical thinking skills in any other system in the world. When it comes to your work, when it comes to school, when it comes to your kids, when it comes to relationships, but you better not ever question God. You better not ever try to critique and analyze God, and the impact of, your doubts being dismissed is that it creates self-doubt. It makes you second guess your intuition and your capabilities and the things that you can do in life. And, you're incapable. You become to believe that you're incapable of somehow understanding spiritual truth without their guidance. All right. So the first tactic that they will try to use against you is dismissing your doubts. So they might say something like, you're just a little confused. Maybe you have a little bit of a misunderstanding. Maybe you need to ask questions to somebody that actually knows more than you think you know. Just talk to Jesus about it. Deal with these situations with God. Come to God. Talk to God about it. I'm sure he'll give you the answers. Don't lean on your own understanding. Call him up and tell him what you want. That was a song I used to hear back in church. But this is something that they will often tell you, and this statement doesn't really lead you anywhere because it will give you a sense of distrust in yourself. This tactic will allow you to start questioning your own ability to think for yourself and to critically come to your own conclusions, to assess problems. And this impacts you very, very critically, if it's not really, dealt with at a young age or at a certain age where you can control that. Because some people, even I know to this day, they will overthink. They're very indecisive. They have a lot of anxiety around certain situations and problems. And it might even stem from the church. It might stem from being raised up in a very strict religious household. Always being talked down upon. Always being overlooked and dismissed when it comes to their emotions and things like that. This does happen in religious households, So it creates self-doubt. It makes you second guess your intuition and believe that you're incapable of understanding spiritual truth without somebody's guidance. You always have to look to a church. You always got to look to a pastor. You always got to look to somebody who has more. And I'm not saying that you can't learn from people. Don't get it misconstrued, right? Don't misunderstand that. I'm not saying that you can't learn from people, but for you not to come to your own conclusions, right? For you somehow, if something isn't adding up and you're seeing through the lies of something and somebody's telling you trying to make it seem like you're just gullible and naive and that you need proper guidance, we just ain't going for that. So first we need to understand that your doubts are valid. And you might ask, what doubts? Well, let's go a little deeper into that, right? So, a quote that I had seen from Pinterest, all right? I thought this was a really good quote. This might have came from a movie. I need to watch this movie, and y'all let me know in the comments if this is a movie that you might know of. But this man says, you're crazy to everyone who can't manipulate you. And that is facts, It gets to a point where when it comes to the basis of your deconversion, your deconstruction from Christianity, everybody will try to do their best to bring you back into how they knew you, bring you back into what makes them comfortable. And you can't do that. You cannot be the person that is comfortable for everybody, just stay in this square, stay in this box. That's what's safe. That's what makes everybody happy. And you can't be that type of person to make everybody happy. You have to do what's best for you. And we'll go a little bit, deeper into that in this, deconstruction or in this guide, in this presentation. But questions, these are basically questions that people have that eventually lead them out of Christianity. So you might have the question, why would a loving God allow someone suffering? Now, as basic and fundamental as that is, a lot of people just can't wrap their mind around somebody being all good, all loving, and allowing a lot of chaos into this world, right? You might ask, why is God so tyrannical and devious in the Bible? Because when you study the Old Testament, this man has problems. And we'll just keep it at that, right? How could a loving God send people to hell? Why did God have to introduce his son to my ancestors through generational trauma? And like we was talking about from before, a little bit on my deconstruction story, that's what led me to deconstructing Christianity, because it's like, how was it that Christianity was given to my ancestors for generations and generations and generations, and like nothing was done about it? To this day, Christians, like black people, still go to church praising a man who looks the exact opposite of them. And subconsciously, they see people who resonate to Jesus as more divine. They are more deserving of life than they are. Why does God remain silent despite my constant prayers and devotion? Why does the Bible contain outdated and harmful teachings if it's supposed to be timeless? If I was born in a different culture, wouldn't I have a different religion? And if that's the case, does that make my faith invalid? And these are all really good questions. These are all very intellectual questions that should make you ponder on the religion and the God that you've been given since birth. All right, the second rhetoric that they will use against you is to minimize your experience. You're just overreacting. You're doing too much. You're stretching it. Is that what the devil told you? I think you just really need to sit it out with this one. Oh, everybody been through that. Oh, I was there just like you. I experienced the same thing you did. I had those same type of questions too. And it's to really minimize and diminish your whole process and your whole progress in terms of you transforming from, being naive and being delusional to, evolving and progressing into being something better, And like I said, this is not an attack on your religion if you are a Christian. But, if we are going on different bases or on different levels of consciousness, you can't demean and diminish my experience and my questioning system and all these different things to just, oh, I used to be like that too, or I went through the same thing you did and it led me back to Christ. Well, maybe your questioning process led you back to Christ. Mine's didn't. Mine's led me on the high road to knowing myself and loving myself more. But they minimize your experience to downplay your pain and your struggle, right? And to not deal with the actual problem or traumatic things that you may experience in the religion. They will often say these things to make your experience seem somehow insignificant. And they may not intentionally be trying to make your experience insignificant, but that's exactly what they are doing. And so at this point, you may feel silenced. You may feel invalidated, as though your emotions and experiences don't matter. And over time, this can lead to a deep suppression of your emotions and to also internalize guilt. So you need to understand that your pain and your experience is valid. All right. It matters. But you might ask, let's be a little more specific on this pain. Like, what type of pain? What type of experiences? Right. So bring my big head over here. All right. So the painful, traumatic experiences in Christianity, when we're dealing with like struggling with Christian purity culture, I know a lot of women can relate to that. Emotional manipulation through guilt and fear, spiritual burnout from constant striving, judgment, rejection from family or the community. And we'll just briefly, we'll just swift through each of these because I could really deal with each subject matter like individually in a YouTube video or something like that. But, struggling with Christian purity, deals in the basis of, women and men, more specifically women, because there's so much, emphasis on what a woman should do with her body and how a woman should act and represent herself, that she often feels very shameful for even having sexual desires, for wanting to do something with somebody. And so it is just a whole lot of, garbage around that to somehow value yourself, or somehow your value is equated to how many people that you've been with or how many bodies that you've collected. It's stupid. It's beyond me. Emotional manipulation through guilt and fear, being told that you're going to burn in hell, you're going to face judgment day, you're breaking God's heart. All these are manipulation tactics, to guilt trip you or to put you in a state of fear, so that you can, go back into that cycle, go back into the system, go back into the programming that everybody knows you and love you for, but sometimes you really got to pop out. And I was going to quote Kendrick, but I'm going to be nice today. But spiritual burnout, like how we was talking about, like, or in the last, in the previous slides, this whole, basis of, always coming to God, being a fervent prayer warrior, whatever the case is. But you get to a point to where all of that gets exhausting. And it doesn't matter how much you pray. It doesn't matter how much you confess your sins. You always feel like that you're not good enough. And I really have to do like a deep breakdown on not feeling good enough. Always not feeling good enough when you are in religion, when you are in Christianity, because that's the whole system. Like, that's the whole system. That's why people mostly go to church anyway. Some people will say, oh, it's the fellowship and all these different things. But people mostly go to church because they feel bad about what they did from Monday to Saturday. That's why they are so fervent in confessing their sins weekly, because, oh, I'm on a clean slate. It's to make them feel good. Most Christians aren't even really followers of Christ. They are followers of the religion. Most Christians are not followers of Christ. They are followers of their religion. One more time. Most Christians are not followers of Christ. They are followers of their own religion. And that is why they continue to try and reach out to God and pray to God and never feeling good enough and always feeling like they are falling back into sin because I don't believe in sin. But that's why they always feel like that they are falling back and not, having that connection, because they don't understand the connection that is already present. Jesus didn't say the kingdom of God is coming back soon. He didn't say that the kingdom of God is coming back at this specific time or date. He said the kingdom of God is already here. It is among you. It is within you. And if you seek ye first the kingdom of God, all these things will be applied unto you. Pressed down, shaken together. Can I get a witness? All right. But yeah, it's a never ending cycle of condemnation and shame. And yet in the Bible even tells you there is no condemnation to those who are in Christ, which leads us to the judgment and rejection from family and the community, for a child or for a young adult to face isolation from their family, from their friends. I mean, I can't tell you how many friends that I lost going down this road. It's truly crazy. If I was to even talk about it, but being labeled as a lost sheep or led astray by the devil or a devil worshiper or just all type of stuff, right? And you will experience these type of things, but you have to build a certain backbone to walk this path. And the greatest sin of them all, I also got this from Pinterest. But the greatest sin of them all is to even think of yourself as weak. And you can't go for that. You can't think of yourself as weak. You cannot think of yourself as lesser than when it concerns what you've been through and who you are. You're not supposed to identify with your trauma and your pain, but deal with it. Deal with it, internalize it. Find the substance in your pain and then make that your gain. All right, let's move on. Going to the third rhetoric, the attempt to demonize you. This is when they will throw out every possible, like, you a devil worshiper, you turn your back on God, the devil's trying to get you, you need to repent before it's too late, or you working for the devil. I mean, they will just nag you up about the devil, right? And they say these things to demonize you, to try and discredit you. I mean, they did the same thing to Jesus. Ironic enough is that, as soon as he healed somebody, they were like, oh, he does this by the power of Beelzebub. And so, to demonize you is to somehow reinforce the feeling of shame and guilt, and to make you question if, your pursuit in spirituality, your pursuit in truly knowing yourself and knowing other people, and to study other spiritual systems and to create your own pathway, somehow, you don't know if whether or not this is leading you to, to hell, to the lake of fire, to just, constant isolation from family and friends. So some people just rather not go down that route and just conform. It's a very sad sight to see. I've seen it twice. Very sad. But truly understand that your rebellion, let me say it again, your rebellion is valid. And somebody might ask, well, why rebel? Why? What's the whole importance of rebelling? Like, why do I need to rebel? And I'm glad you asked. And a lot of people won't tell you this, or maybe they won't say this in the church, but to rebel is the first step to growth and liberation. Now, rebelling doesn't have to mean that you are getting, pitchforks and, weapons and a whole lot of ammunition to try and rebel and make a statement, right? Rebelling could just simply being yourself and not allowing the outside forces of this world or family or your community try and change you for who you are, right? You're supposed to stand for who you are and for what you are. Same thing that Lucifer did, right? Even though Lucifer isn't in the Bible. But we'll deal with that for another time, for another day, okay? So rebellion is the first step to growth and liberation, right? And as you can see over here, I have a picture of like a serpent hand holding like this cup. And to me, it represents like holding that cup of having that juice, that comes from the forbidden fruit. You feel me? So is you realigning yourself with that true divine nature within you. Is you having the knowledge of good and evil. Is you awakening that kundalini. Some of y'all may not even know what I'm talking about, like kundalini, We'll deal with that at the very end of this presentation, all right? Now, and I'll show you and I'll tell you where you can get even more information on that, all right? But for those who know, all right, or who at least have a gist of it, rebellion, if you are familiar with the story of Lucifer, he's the one that caused havoc in heaven, right? He crashed out. He was the first YN to crash out. And basically because of him, a third of the angels supposedly went with him and basically proclaimed him to be their leader. Now, there's many different narratives, that Christians and the church will come up with and things of that nature. Lucifer, if you didn't know, is not in the Bible, all right? This whole war in heaven and a third went along with him is not in the Bible. All right. These are just legends that people believe in so that they can give you the okie doke on this fictional being so that they can program you. All right. But just entertain it for a second. If you are to question this ideology or this story about Lucifer, you have to ask, like, well, how convincing was he to encourage a third of the angels to follow him? Like, what was the true reason? What was the real reason? Instead of hearing from the victor's standpoint, right? And we know this God is jealous. We know this God is arrogant. We know this God is very narcissistic. He has a way of twisting things to his own way, right? He has a way of sending deceiving and deceptive spirits whenever it works in his, in his will. He has a way of hardening the hearts of pharaohs and people for his own plans, right? So, and I don't mean to make this a breakdown, of biblical story, but I've always wanted, even when I was a Christian, I always wanted to ask, or wonder, like, what was Satan's side of the story? Not that I really wanted to be on Satan's side, but it's like, you study all these different ideologies and mythologies, and you, even if you are an anime fan, it's always typically the person who was always demonized that had a good reason. Sometimes the villain is not even the villain. Sometimes the person that is painted as the bad guy is never really the bad guy. These are just things to ponder on, but Lucifer was the first rebel, right? He's the archetype of being the rebel or the personal adversary. And these characters are elements within yourself. And to me, the story of Lucifer represents for you to really become your own person, and to not be a follower, and to not just listen to what's being told to you. And this is not an excuse for you to just be havoc, or be chaotic, or to not have order, or to not learn from people, or to not have a mentor. If you did get that, if your intellect went to that basis, or went to that level of understanding what I'm talking about, this probably is not the type of information for you. I mean, you're on a video as we're talking about a presentation about, being guided into, into Christian gaslighting. If your mind went to that, I don't know, just work on it. But as I said, rebellion is the first step to growth and liberation. And when dealing with that, you have authenticity and self-discovery, you have intellectual freedom, you have emotional and mental liberation, and you are breaking cycles of control. And, all of these elements are very important for you to develop your own person and develop your own spiritual path. All right. With ethical growth, courage to live authentically, advocating for voices to be heard, creating a more inclusive worldview, and living without fear. These are also other aspects for you to also rebel and to create a new life for yourself, which is why I have here a new era of me. And that's what this is all about, is for you to bring a new aspect of yourself that you have never seen before, and later on, as we get into this presentation, we'll get more into the aspect of that. But it is very important for you to reshape these aspects of yourself, to have ethical growth, to have the courage to live your true self. You know what I'm saying? To really build that resilience and courage to live according to your convictions and your analysis of life, rather than conforming to how other people see life and to please others. And we've been emphasizing that in this deconstruction guide, of not being a pushover, not being the person that is going to be complacent just so that everybody else can smile. If you got to make some frowns, make some frowns. All right. When it comes to you advocating for other voices to be heard, you rebel. It challenges these outdated hierarchies, and, it supports a level for you and people around you. Also, people also around you can feel influenced to also share their voices, and also share their concerns, and also share their questions about the religion and spirituality in itself. I know so many people who are raised up in religious households right now, and they are scared. They're scared. They scared to the bone, because they don't want to upset mother. They want to upset their father. They want to upset the family. They want to upset grandmama and grandpapa, because everybody is so held down to their religion that they don't want to break their hearts. So they just stay to themselves. They just go with the flow. And there comes a point where you are still trapped. You're still the bird trapped in the cage. And eventually, and I'm not saying that you need to crash out. I'm not saying that. All right. I'm not saying that you need to let your whole family know about your belief system and cause havoc just to cause havoc. But what needs to be assessed is that you have to find outlets to express yourself, because I know what it's like to just really stay to yourself and not have a circle or people around you or some type of outlet to where, you could truly express yourself. Excuse me. To where you can truly express yourself and be who you truly were meant to be. And getting into like creating a more inclusive, worldview, you get into a basis of really being more diverse with your outlook of life. You understand that there isn't just one way to interpret God. You realize there isn't just one way to express God. And that's the beauty of life. I love to study other spiritual systems and other cultures and how they view and perceive God. And everybody doesn't have all the answers. One of the quotes I love from Socrates, he says that if there's one thing that I know is that I know nothing. And the person who proclaims to know nothing knows all, and the one who proclaims to know all know nothing. And the emphasis in that is to basically say, like, a person who proclaims to know nothing will, go through life everlasting, or rather getting everlasting knowledge, right? They'll go through life and their consistency or their position in getting knowledge is nonstop, right? There is no limit for them in terms of getting information and knowledge. Whereas the person who thinks they know it all can't learn anything. Their level to learn information from other people is very suppressed. So that's the beauty of it. Living without fear is such a beautiful thing when you deconstruct from Christianity, when you leave Christianity, and you no longer have to look over your shoulder, of God punishing you or the devil leading you astray and all these other different matters. You control your life, All right, let's continue. All right, to the fourth and final rhetoric, twisting your emotions. And this is the whole basis of like them trying to minimize your emotions. Oh, somebody hurt you. You must be butthurt. You must have gone through something in your life. And I'm just sorry that you had to go through that. Maybe you should find a better household, or rather a better community, a better church family. I'm sorry that you experienced those type of things in life. And this is something, and we'll get into the basis of like how you can combat these rhetorics. But one of the, like, when we're dealing with this one, you should never let somebody minimize your emotions. And I know from experience when I talk to women do not want you to tell them like, oh, you're being emotional, you're overreacting. No, bro. That's not how you deal with women. That's not how you talk to women. All right. When it comes to a woman being emotional and you feel like she's being hyper emotional, there is a way for you to deal with that correctly and properly to where she can even understand you and come down to the basis of where you're coming from. But you don't tell a woman that she's being overreactive or she's being over emotional, because then she's going to get even more emotional. She might even shut down, and it's just not needed, bro. It's not needed because she won't feel like she's being heard. She's feel like she's, you just dismissing the current issue and problem. And these are things that she's taken in. And so those, silent treatment for 1 to 2 to 3 days isn't needed when you could just resolve things within 1 to 2, 3 minutes. Here's what you do. What you do is you acknowledge her emotions, acknowledge the situation, and then you clarify your standpoint on the situation, whatever it may be. And if you are truly in the wrong, apologize, console her, meet her halfway, give her a little kiss, tell her you love her. Have the emotional intelligence to understand that, you hear her where she's coming, you hear where she's coming from, you understand where she's coming from. You meet her where she's at emotionally. If she is doing too much, when you see that she's calmed down and you study her body gesture, her body language and things, and maybe it's not even needed at that moment, when y'all are good throughout the day, you could bring it up to the forefront, tell her like, there's better ways I feel like we can communicate. And she's like, yeah, I agree. I apologize. And then she might apologize. And then next thing you know, you getting head. Like, there's just better ways for you to assess these type of things. But what do I know? What do I know? right? This is about a deconstruction guide. This isn't about a relationship guide, all right? But if you want a relationship guide, you let me know in the comments below, all right? But getting to the matters here, right? When they try to twist your emotion, they try to demean and diminish how you're feeling, you don't go for that, bro. That's and I know what it's like to be overlooked or to have, somebody's voice be more powerful or somebody's voice being bigger or louder than yours. Or when you say something, it might be a little timid, so then they just bypass what you say altogether. I know what that's like. So for somebody to try and dismiss your emotions and your hurt and your trauma, your religious trauma and your experiences, to just, oh, I'm sorry somebody hurt you, or that's why you haven't truly accepted Jesus. Those were just people. You need to truly accept Jesus and he can lift every burden. That doesn't solve anything. That don't solve shit. Right? Because now you're just really bypassing the trauma. You're bypassing the experience in hopes of for somebody to accept your delusion. We're not doing that. So to make these type of statements will allow a person to make themselves think that their feelings and their emotions are invalid. And the impact of that is that, you may feel pressure to fix yourself, or, you're dismiss your emotions. You're dismiss how you feel in the moment, or you might dismiss, whenever somebody's coming at you disrespectfully or incorrectly. And then you might ponder and say, well, maybe I was a little disrespectful. Maybe I should be a little more lenient toward. Don't do that. If you know they were in the wrong, if you know they were being disrespectful, stand 10 toes down on it. Even if it means risking losing a friendship, losing relationships with family, whatever the case is, right? But if you do get down to that point, you have those thoughts of sometimes you feel pressure to correct yourself. You rather trust them than trust yourself. You get into this whole rhetoric, you get into this whole routine of, constantly blaming yourself of how other people are treating you. Like it's terrible. It's terrible. It's mind rotting, So your emotions are valid, and that's something that really needs to be, expressed. That's something that really needs to be brought out to the forefront, is that your emotions are valid. And somebody might ask, well, what type of emotions? Like, let's go a little deeper. What would you be in your feelings about? And I have these questions here, right? These questions are things that you may have asked in terms of your personal religious trauma, your personal pain, your experiences. This might be something you might go through as you're deconstructing and you're falling away from Christianity, and you might feel a sense of grief. you might feel a sense of stress. Why am I feeling lost? What if I go to hell? How am I supposed to serve a cruel God? What really is the true way to God? Am I betraying my family and everything I was taught? Why did I believe this in the first place? Why did I believe this for so long? What if me deconstructing is me being wrong altogether? Like, what if I'm putting myself in another hole? You might feel like you're losing a part of yourself. You might feel like you're causing your family to look at you in a very negative way, and you're like, is this even worth it? You might even feel a sense of betrayal towards your family because you've been going this long throughout life without even having any type of outside sources to even combat the things that you were brought up to believe in. So now you're mad at the world. You mad at Christians every time you come across them because it just reminds you of the people that you went to school with, or that you went to church with, or that you grew up with. All that in a box of chocolate. And the ones that I have highlighted are the questions that I had personally for myself, and I had to come to a realization that this is not personal when it comes to them, right? It's personal for you, but it's not. People outside of you should not take it personal when you choose to deconstruct and when you choose to, correct your own path. So please keep that in mind as you are deconstructing. And please understand that all of your thoughts, all of your emotions, all of your pain and your trauma are necessary. It is necessary. And that's something that I wanted to emphasize to let you know. So just to give you a little feedback on all the things that we have assessed, the 4 particular rhetorics that people will give to you. So to really bring this all to closure with those 4 particular tactics, you are not betraying anybody. Do not let anybody make you even think that you're betraying, a family member, or you're turning your back on the family. All these traditional things. We're children of God. We are a sanctified, holy Christian household, and here you go trying to mess everything up, and then really trying to shame you and trying to make you the cause for the dysfunction of the family. There was already dysfunction. You already know there was already dysfunction, and they're going to try and blame it on you because you choose to go down your own personal spiritual route. Don't go for that. Don't go for that. Don't allow anybody to make you think in your family that you're the reason for the center of their dysfunction, when you're just finding yourself, when you're just on another path, you're on another journey. And that's very critical that you stand 10 toes down when you're confronted by family, when you're confronted by friends, when you're confronted by people that you love, because that's the true test. You do not want to just go back on your word. You don't want to go back on the things that you set forth for yourself. And then you go back into that cycle and you continue to be more depressed. You continue to be, more passive. You want to take a stand now by any means necessary. And like I said before, if I haven't said it already, this is not a way for you to cause ruckus intentionally, but there has to come a time in your life where you have to make a stand for yourself. And it starts today. It starts today. So just keep that in mind. You are not betraying anybody, but it's also okay to be angry and frustrated at your families. It's okay to be frustrated, in the sense of you felt like you wasn't given the right information growing up. You wasn't given, the resources to know more and to do better and to be better. So you come to a point where sometimes you may feel like you've wasted a lot of time thinking that Jesus was coming back, or you wasted a lot of time thinking that you're going to face judgment day, or that you're going to face eternal torment in hell, or, should I be masturbating right now? I don't want to make myself feel good right now because he might be watching me, and I don't want to have these sinful, lustful thoughts, even though I'm feeling a little horny right now. People literally will put themselves in the dirt because of beating their deke, because they want to rub one out. It is completely despicable, and I truly hate it. I hate and I despise this conception that is given in the church and that's given through this religion of pleasure. Just bodily pleasure, like pleasure to yourself alone. And then I think that's probably a breakdown that I have to do, on YouTube in itself, maybe even do a really deep dive in presentation for those who become a member and stuff like that in the future, if that is something that y'all would like to know or that y'all want from me. But I am a very, sensual person. Because I've grown up being so, I guess ashamed of it growing up. I always felt shameful for wanting to express it. I always felt shameful for having those thoughts. And it got to a point where when I got rid of religion, I began to accept more of that, about myself. But what was interesting was that when I started entering into the Black consciousness movement, it was the same rhetoric. Like these people who just went from Christianity into Christianity, or from Christianity into the Black consciousness movement, they had their little head wraps and their little unks and their Hut Haru names and Osiris Anubis names. And they just went from one religion to another. They just went from one dogma to another. They just changed uniforms. It was the same rhetoric. It's the same system. They just changed uniforms. And so that's something that you don't want to do, when you are deconstructing. But that's another topic for another day, right? I don't want to ramble on that aspect. But to get back on basis on topic, it is okay to be frustrated. It is okay to be angry. But let that be a passion. Let that be a tool to utilize and not a reason to crash out. You do not want to be crashing out on your family that you love, your friends that you love, your community that you love, because you're just going to be looked at as very spiteful, very brokenhearted. And you can be brokenhearted. You have a right to feel brokenhearted and to feel, this sense of hurt. It's valid, but do not let that be your brand. Do not let that be the forefront for who you are. Let that be a motivation to learn more. Let that be a motivation to do more. Let that be a motivation to, not be complacent and just stand on the sidelines and just let life go by. You utilize that, make it your greatest strength. Let it, guide you towards healing and not self-hate, not self-blame, not being bitter. Let that be the start for your journey in life, and always realize that, this is a process and a journey of finding yourself, not losing yourself. Even like people will only identify you with the, who they think you are. And that's not valid. If you are somebody who is continuing to pursue the better aspect of yourself, and you have people around you who keep trying to pull you back on who they think or who you used to be, you either have to cut them people off, or you have to set them straight and let them know, like, I am on a different path. I am working on something right now. I am in the process of being the better aspect of myself. And if they can't respect that, if they keep bringing on, different aspects and different parts of yourself, you just might have to disassociate from them people and continue on your journey. So realize you are not losing yourself. You are shedding things away from yourself that was never yours to begin with. This false identity that was given to you, during birth, this false identity that was programmed in you, because of, your unconscious behaviors. So please understand that. That is something that's very critical when it comes to your enlightenment, right? It is okay to be at peace. It is okay to be content with who you are and where you are in this world. Feeling that relief after deconstructing can be very, very sensitive. It can really feel like you are on, this ride, this roller coaster ride. You're having your ups and downs, but them ups feel very, very like a climax. It just feels really nice to be at peace. There's no other way to explain it other than to just have that feeling of, I don't have to worry about tomorrow. I don't have to worry about somebody looking down upon me or punishing me. I can take responsibility and accountability for my life right now. I can, sense when something is going wrong before it goes wrong. I can make certain adjustments in my life before I cause wreckage. I can learn to communicate with people without deflecting and projecting. I can deal with my emotions and deal with my grief and deal with my depression or deal with my stress instead of being complacent and, snuggling up in my bed all day and not wanting to be productive. This is a journey of you taking full accountability of who you are as God in the flesh. And that is something that the church has never taught you. I'm willing to bet on it. They might give you some good motivation and give your burdens and give your life to Jesus and just talk to Jesus. That doesn't do anything. For some people, it might, you could utilize the tool and whatever the case is, and they can get you by to a certain point. But a lot of us are seeing through the hoopla. A lot of us understand that there ain't the juice is gone, bro. The jig is up. The jig is up. So it truly internalize that piece, because ask about me. Like I said before, there are people that I have worked with, people that I've went to school with, and people would tell you I'm the most chill guy you'll ever know. I might be a little crazy. I might troll a little bit. I might, be a little passionate on social media, but I'm about as chill as it gets when it's in person. People will ask me, like, I don't never see you mad. I don't never see you upset. You don't let people get under your skin. Like, what is it? What is the basis for that? Like, what do you practice? What do you, what is your religion? What do you believe? Like, how do you continue to have this composure about yourself? And I just simply tell people, like, I don't let life get to me like that. You know, there's so much more to value in life. There's so much more to appreciate in life and to focus on in life than the little things, the temporary things. And that's come through a process of suffering for a long extended time. That's come from a process of being complacent for a long extended time. That's come from a process of not knowing who I am for a long period of time. That came from a long period of accepting BS from past relationships for a long extended time. And I learned through all that process and through the ups and downs and through crying at night, crying myself to sleep at night, you know, feeling like I wasn't, you know, somebody special, like to such a point that I even cut my hair. I didn't even feel like myself. I didn't even like who I saw in myself. And I cut off my crown, bro. I was that down bad. I thought that having a new look altogether would change it, and it didn't change anything. The same me was still there. The same habits was still there. The same grief, the same depression. And I don't even want to call it depression because I don't want to be those type of people that just claim that just because that's just how I was feeling. There's no other word to use. But, you know, that stress, that's what I was feeling. That's what I was going through. And I cut off all my hair because of that. I was in a very toxic type of relationship during that time. And it allowed me to focus more on my negative than the positive. And I was still pushing through, putting out content, all this type of stuff. And this relationship was not, it had nothing to do with, religion. Mostly don't have nothing to do with this, the topic altogether. But hopefully with that aspect, with that particular, information, it can allow you to see that you can still be at peace. If you look back at my content, I won't give you a certain time, but, when I didn't have this hair, when I cut it all off altogether, my topics and the things that I was talking about, and, I still had my flow. I still had my personality and charisma and things like that, but it wasn't me. You could look in my eyes. If you are a person who studies people, I was not that person, but I will make a video about that years in the future. But I say all that to say that I found my peace again along the way. I grew my hair back out. I went back to being myself. I went back to, going back to my roots and my origin of who I am, to who I was destined to be, who I was purposed to be. And that's another aspect to this deconstruction journey, is for you to study yourself, to know thyself, and then you shall know the gods. You shall know all these different key points of the universe that dwell within you as well. So be at peace and never validate your system to them. Never validate your system to anybody that is willing to misunderstand you, who voluntarily misunderstands you. Your worth isn't measured. I'm going to read this out. Your worth isn't measured by their approval. Your beliefs are sacred because they are yours. You don't owe anyone an explanation or validation for your truth. The need to prove yourself comes from fear, but you are not obligated to live in someone else's comfort zone. I hope that was a bar for you. I truly and deeply hope that was a bar for you. You are obligated, or rather, you are not obligated to validate, to make yourself seem credible to somebody else, because you are now walking a new life. People can have their questions. They can have their sit downs. You can have conversations with people. That's fine and dandy. But you have to also have boundaries within these conversations, because there are some people who feel like that you have to credit or you have to validate what you believe in. And that's not right, because they come into the conversation narcissistic. They come into the conversation looking at you as inferior. They come into the conversation as if you are a target or an opponent. And if the conversation is already starting off like that, you're not going to have a productive conversation. We should have these conversations as friends. We should have these conversations as people who are trying to understand more about each other and life itself, not for, you trying to convert me back to your dogmatic religion. It just is what it is. So do not validate your system, your religion, your spirituality, your motto, your way of life to anybody. It is you and you to embody and to live out that, and just be yourself. There's nothing wrong with being yourself. Being yourself is actually the greatest aspect that you could ever embody in life. I heard something that Rick Rubin said on a podcast, recently, is that the greatest way for you to connect with the world is to just be yourself. And that's such a beautiful thing to really internalize in life, because a lot of people feel like that they have to change up for somebody. A lot of people feel like that they have to be something that they are not. And that's not right. You truly need to understand who you are in this world, because that is your greatest power. And that is how you exceed in life. So please keep that in mind. It is okay to be at peace. Never validate your system to them, and be yourself. So you might ask now, well, what do I do with this information now? Well, how does this help me out in life, right? Well, now it is time for you to do the goddamn work. All right. It's time for you to put pen to paper and truly act this out. Right. First and foremost, lean on your own understanding. This is something that the church will never advocate for you to do, is to lean on your own understanding. Why? Because they need you to be programmed. They need you to follow suit to anything and everything that they tell you. If you do ask questions, and ask questions outside of the boundaries of what you aren't supposed to ask, you will be looked at as an outcast. You will be looked at as demon possessed. You will be looked at as a heretic and a heathen and all these other different matters. Leaning on your own understanding has got me so far in life than for me to focus on let go and let God. Let go and let God. Oh, let go. For those who were raised up in the church or who were raised up in some Christian household, you probably heard that song before, But leaning on your own understanding, leaning on my own internal divine wisdom and understanding and knowledge has allowed me to get so much farther in life than to just blindly follow another man's religion or blindly follows another man's doctrine. Thinking that some spook is watching over me and I'm getting in contact with it when the energy has always been within me this whole time. And you need to also acknowledge that energy within yourself. Always love yourself. And I can't really stress this enough. Loving yourself is how you are going to exceed in life. This is how you are going to really get through a lot of your process in deconstructing from Christianity farther, being more of a skeptic and truly creating your own spirituality and your own religion. If you don't love yourself, you can't love another person. Even in the Bible, it tells you to love your neighbor as yourself. It's 2 commandments in one. If you don't love yourself, you can't love your neighbor. Even in the Bible, it also tells you, how can you love God who you have not seen and hate your brother who you have seen? And a deeper aspect to that is because God dwells within everyone and everything. And if you can't even acknowledge the God in another person, if you can't even love and show respect to the average person or to somebody next to you, how in the world can you proclaim to love God? How can you proclaim to be a follower and heir of God, and yet this is how you act? There's so many Christians that come in my DMs every single day and cast down hate to me, cursing themselves because by you trying to curse me or trying to put negative on me, you just put negative on yourself, because I do not fit myself according to how you think of me. And even more so, my protection, my provision, everything that I have, everything that I do is because of the higher power, the divine source that is within me. So if you go against me and you talk bad on me, you talking bad on God. You talking bad on the Most High. You talking bad on supreme consciousness, something that you truly aren't tapped into. So when you talking bad on me, you talking bad on the OG. So you won't even have to deal with me. You got to deal with that source and that power, and everything that you try to throw back on me just comes back in your face 3 times fold. All right. That is called being a seed of Abraham. I'll call it being an offspring of Brahma, you know. But, you know, I digress. But loving yourself is very key. Very key. Now, these are 2 quotes that I want you to also embody. Okay. These are 2 quotes. All right. Seneca, who was a Roman philosopher, he said, think of each day as a single life. Okay. And that is very important, because for you as a person who is deconstructing from Christianity, somebody who has already deconstructed from Christianity, or you have questions, you know, concerning your religion, do not wait for somebody else to stand up for you. Do not wait for a movement to happen. Do not wait for a shift in the atmosphere. A shift in the atmosphere. Do not wait. Do not wait. How you feel right now and how passionate you feel right now about it, act on it in the now. You know, make the change in the now. And you don't have to be somebody like me and be a content creator and post content about this in order for you to express it. You could just really just change your life up and design and, you know, reformat your life, which is called a lifestyle. Restyle your life to how it can now benefit you and condition you to be a better person, you know, to be more successful in life. You don't have to go down the content creator route and let everybody know about your deconstruction story. But a lot of us who are content creators choose to go down that route, you know, and to relate and connect with other people. And if my content does, you know, connect with you on the basis of these stories, that's what I'm here for. And I'm truly grateful for that, you know. But think of each day as if you are living your life to the fullest, because you do not know what tomorrow holds, right? So you want to live your best life the best way that you know how, and in a life where you won't feel regret. You know, a life where you won't look back and be like, man, I wish I would have did this. I wish I would have did that. I wish I would have stood up for myself. You know, you want to stand up for yourself now, you know, and you will be tested, but it is time for you to fight back. You know, you have to let these people know that your thoughts and your feelings and this new shift in your life can never be dismissed. It cannot be dismissed or overlooked. You have to make a change. You have to make the decision and let people know, like, this is not a phase. This is not an arc. This is not a character arc. This is me. This is the route that I'm deciding to go down. You know, and there ain't nothing you can do about it. Okay. Now, moving on to this, you have to trust the process. And some people will try to speed up the process. And I don't know why people will try to do that. I don't know why people would try to speed up the process when it concerns the basis of your character development and your spiritual life. But you have to be patient when becoming someone that you haven't seen before. I would personally say you have to be patient when becoming the person that you haven't been before. Or rather, they said been before. I would say you haven't seen before, right? Let me say that again. All right. I botched that. Be patient when becoming someone you haven't been before. I would say be patient when becoming someone you haven't seen before, because you are everything and everything is you, right? The best aspect of yourself already dwells within inside of you. You just have to bring that person out, right? So each day, whether it's 1% better or 5% better or 10% better, each day you are striving to become the person that you can already visualize. You can already see in your mind and see that mansion or that nice car, or you just, you know, stacking loads of money, you know, having over $200,000 in your bank account. You can see it. I can see it. For me, living my best life and living according to my brand, I can see that. If you can't see that within yourself, something is wrong. If you can't see yourself being the most successful in the you know, the best that you can be in this world, something is deeply wrong. So truly, please trust the process. Heal the inner child. You have to heal the inner child. If you don't heal your inner child, you are doomed to repeat the cycles of that which you have not dealt with. Okay. Some people call this shadow work. whatever you want to call this process, but you have to make reconciliation with the things of the past. You have to forgive your parents for not knowing everything that there was to know about this life, especially when it concerns God. You have to forgive yourself for not knowing everything that you know now. You have to forgive yourself for, the negative traits and the aspects of yourself that you never let go. The people that you may have mistreated. The person that you just never allowed yourself to become. You have to forgive yourself and now allow yourself to grow and develop and to become something that you have never seen before. So you have to reconcile with that inner child and become childlike to enter into this state of abundance, to enter into this state of now you know yourself and you stand tall for yourself, because nobody could stand tall for you when you were little. And now you get to be the person to stand tall for your inner self, right? But get to the point, Tyrone. All right. I get what you're saying. You're saying a lot of good stuff, but you need to get to the point. I need to know how I need to combat this gaslighting techniques, right? And you would think by now, I kind of gave you everything that there is to know. I kind of gave you everything that there is to know about, combating these points and stuff like that, right? But I want to give you a clear format, right? A clear graphic format for how you can combat these techniques, right? Or these rhetorics, right? So we're going to go down to these 4 rhetorics and assess them. So let's go to the first column, right? So as we was discussing, talking about how people will dismiss you and say that you are confused. Basically, this whole basis of, dismissing your doubts. And so this is what you will want to say versus this is what you should avoid, right? So I just gave you a couple of examples of what you can say. Of course, these are very long, kind of corny, maybe, if you if you will, basis of examples when it concerns the basis of somebody telling you that you're confused, you don't know what you're talking about, you need to go do more research and studies. But you can see the difference in terms of having more of an affirmative and empowered, response rather than you having somebody, say this to you and then you are very reactive, very defensive, So, having more of an affirmative basis when, like, if somebody was to tell me, like, you don't know what you're talking about, you confused, you need to go study more, you need to go read your Bible. For one, I kind of just bypass it. Because I've just heard it so many different times from so many different people. I don't even really acknowledge it. That's another way that you could deal with it. But if you first time entering into this and a loved one tries to tell you this, your first automatic response is to get defensive, right? That's what you want to avoid. So in response to that, to fill in that void of reaction and defensive, you want to have more of a positive and affirmative and an empowered response rather than an immature and defensive reaction, right? So you can simply come back and respond to that and be like, no, I'm not confused. I don't need to study more than I need to know. You're trying to demean my intelligence right now, and I don't appreciate that. I'm not confused. I'm exploring different aspects of my spiritual journey, and I'm having more of an open mind to the basis of my own personal journey right now. Excuse me. I'm allowed to question. I am allowed to study and, widen my range on how I see life and how I see spirituality. I'm very curious. I'm very skeptical. I want to know what is out there. I just don't, the connection that I used to have with this religion or with Jesus or with Christianity is no longer there. That doesn't mean that I don't have a spiritual relationship with God. That doesn't mean that I am, casting away all of there is to know about God and spirituality in itself. But one thing for sure, I am not confused. And I would appreciate if you don't try to demean or look down upon my intelligence doing that. If a person, you're having this conversation with somebody and if they can't respect that, you got to keep it moving. And some of us, we will sometimes get so defensive to the basis of like we are entertaining ourselves into having like a whole 1 hour, 2 hour conversation about completely nothing. And then when you get off the phone with that person, or when you leave that person, you're frustrated throughout the whole day, thinking about that one conversation when you could have just easily dismissed it from jump. You see that? Because it gives power back in your hand. Rather than the other person to upset you and then they end off the conversation, you can just dismiss it up front. You can let them know where you stand, and like, you know, I ain't no punk. Like, you're not gonna be over here trying to say all this hoo-ha and talking out the side of your neck. But I also do not have to give you my time, because my time is valuable and my energy is valuable. You feel me? So you don't want to have like to reinforce their dismissal. You don't want to do that. And you also do not want them, you don't want to say this whole basis of like, you don't understand what I'm going through in this in this concept around like being very dramatic. I guess that there's no other way to really base that, but that could definitely escalate the conversation. You do not want to start escalating the conversation, especially if you're talking about this with a loved one, a spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, all that type of hoo-ha. Minimizing your experience. So same thing from before. Somebody tells you you're just overreacting, you're reaching. What you will want to say is, I'm not reaching. And by you saying that I'm reaching, or that I'm overreacting, or what I went through is not what I went through, you are trying to minimize and demean what I've been through and what I've went through. And you got to let that person know up front, like, I don't appreciate you trying to minimize what I've been through. I don't appreciate you trying to demean, my emotions and what I've gone through and everything like that. Because my feelings are valid. And the things that I have been through are valid. And you don't have a right to sit here and try and tell me that I'm reaching, I'm overreacting, just to try and make a point. And you should feel that you are responsible for your true spiritual path, and that you are allowed to acknowledge your experiences and build off of your experiences. You don't need permission or validation to walk this journey. And you can base your life on the reality in which you live in. And as I said from, time ago, that, a picture holds 1,000 words. And it'll just be very disingenuous, or very dishonest to sit here and try and tell you like there's just only one way to describe truth. There's only one path to, infinite source or infinite reality. So when it comes to somebody telling you you're overreacting, what you don't want to do is, be reactive, accept what they're saying about you, being passive and all these other type of things. You have to stand your ground on your experiences, stand your ground on what you've been through, stand your ground on your emotions, and do not let anybody try to demean and debase you. Get into the third column, labeling you as lost. You've turned your back on God. You turn your back on your family. You letting the devil talk in your ear. He leading you astray. You're going to go to hell. All these different things, right? And you have to have more of an affirmative, position of just saying like, the path that I'm walking may not be the one that you like right now. It may not be something that you technically agree with, but that's the path that I'm choosing to go down, and that doesn't mean that I'm lost. I'm not listening to some type of devil figure, me choosing, the belief system or the spiritual journey that I choose to live in and choose to conduct myself in isn't me betraying you, or it's not an attack on you or a target on you. It's me being myself. It's me going through this journey of life on my own. And that might give you a little slick reaction, oh, well, you're going to come back to Jesus eventually. I used to be like that too. And you got to really just let that off your shoulders, bro. You really just got to like take that up the chin, because it's just something that it gives them comfort false hope gives them comfort, and you do not want to fulfill their false hope. All right. So please stand up for yourself. All right. You do not want to be reactive or defensive in the basis of somebody telling you that you turn your back on God. You know, you don't want to make yourself seem like that you don't know what you're studying, you know, and even if you are just asking questions, you should stand your ground and be, defensive in the basis of, you know, your stuff, whether you are a fervent Christian and you know your stuff, or you are somebody who is deconstructing and you know your stuff about, the dark side or the dark truths and the flaws and the little dirty marks that people don't want to discuss and bring up when it concerns Christianity. And you also don't want to be dismissive back. You don't want to project the same energy that they might be trying to give to you of like, well, I don't care what you think. Especially if it's a loved one or if it's a boyfriend or girlfriend, you don't want to just cause, like I said, you want to cause ruckus and, confliction just because. So keep that in mind. Lastly, you're just hurt. And that's why you're going down this path. That's why you are choosing to go down the devil route. That's why you're easily being misled, because somebody hurt you, and they really would emphasize on the hurt if you discuss to them, why you are deconstructing from Christianity. At any point in the conversation, that will be their main target. So you do not want to reveal that wound, reveal that scar to somebody who is religious, especially somebody who is religiously narcissistic, religious and narcissistic. So, but if it ever do get to that point of them saying like, who hurt you, or you're just hurt, you could say, no, this is not about hurt. This is about my truth, right? This is not about being hurt. This is about living the reality in which I live in and discovering the truth for myself. This is not about being hurt and going through some type of traumatic experience, even though some of us and most of us have been through traumatic experiences. This is not about that. This is about establishing my foundation on good ground. You see what I'm saying? So, but even more so, if we are to acknowledge the pain, it is okay to acknowledge the pain, that becomes a stepping stone to your healing journey. Instead of you looking at it as some type of act of weakness and you just keep disregarding that pain and that trauma, or you could just upfront and acknowledge that, yeah, I have experienced pain. You could have, told them about your experience in the church and all the bad things that were said to you from your parents. And you could acknowledge like, yeah, I have experienced this type of hurt, but it is through that hurt that I have found clarity, and I've been on this path of growing. And it is because of that now I choose liberation for myself. I choose to live the life that I live for myself and for myself alone. Not because of hurt, not because I have to try and heal more. No, me living my life is the healing process. So same thing, you don't want to react, be defensive. You don't want to project to be like, I'm not hurt, I'm fine. I'm doing okay, I'm doing all right. Or, but you hurt me. Or you don't know what you're talking about, or you need to mind your business. You don't want to have those type of reactions, because it doesn't make you look good. It doesn't make you look like you know what you're talking about. It just makes you look very over emotional, right? In the negative. So I have a bonus. I don't know if this was a surprise for you, but I have a bonus gaslighting rhetoric that Christians use on you. And I'm going to give you the way in which you can come back and, give your own personal, response to this. All right. So drum roll. Forced confrontation. Now, this is something that's really big, because a lot of Christians, especially like if you're dealing with strict parents, strict grandparents or uncle, auntie, some of them will really get up in your face and will be very defensive about their God and their Jesus. So this is where pen comes to paper. This is where you have to really put your words and your thoughts to practice. And so they could literally be like, well, you need to tell me why you don't believe in God right now. You need to tell me right now why you don't believe in Jesus and why you let the devil do this to you. And you could just plainly tell them, this is just me. This is just me being me. And if you don't like that, I'm sorry you feel that way, but this is just me being me. I have came to the conclusion that this religion, your God, Jesus, just ain't for me. You could also tell them, like, well, I don't owe you an explanation for my beliefs. That's my personal journey. This is my personal journey, and I don't feel comfortable right now in this predicament telling you about why I believe, especially if it's just going to be put back in my face. So no, thank you. And just leave it at that. Just leave it at that. And if they continue to keep trying to push it and try to budge, and just leave it at that. You can, acknowledge them and continue to acknowledge them, but you don't leave it there. Leave it at that. What you don't want to do is be reactive and defensive and go on this whole basis of telling them from beginning to end where it all started and where it all happened. Worst case scenario is that they keep interrupting you in the middle of you telling your story, and then y'all just get off base with the whole story, and then it's all about why you don't believe in God conversation. You also don't want to be reflecting or projecting and being like, well, you're the one being deceived, not me. You don't want to put it back in their face as much as they're trying to put it back in your face, because it makes you look much as a fool as they are already being. So that is something to truly keep in mind and to acknowledge on the basis of that. And in conclusion, with all of these rhetorics, these are just 3 simple things to keep in mind to just keep your courage up, right? You have to find your light and be the light. You have to set your let me say this right. You have to set yourself from everybody else. You have to stand out. If you don't truly internalize who you are and set yourself apart from everybody else and cast forth your light to the world, you're going to be like everybody else. You have to be different. But even more so, you have to be your light, your lifestyle, your motto, the way that you would like to live. It begins today. And you cannot suppress this feeling for too long. If you do, life will pass you by. I can't stand when I hear Christians tell me like, oh, I don't mind if I believe in God and at the end of it, he doesn't exist, because I feel like I'll have lived a very good life. I hate that, because it's like, why would you want to continuously believe in a lie? It's like you entertain being spiritually scammed. It's like, you entertain spiritualizing scamming, but if anybody was to scam you out of your money, you'd be tight. If anybody was to scam you out of, a bed, and then the bed isn't as good as it, advertised to be, you would be tight. If somebody was to advertise to you like you're going to get a free membership and then that membership ends in 7 days, you would be tight. So please do not try to tell me that you will feel content in life when living all the 70, 80, 90 years of your life, and you come at the very end of it and you come to find out that what you believed in and what you've sacrificed and dedicated your whole life to was a lie. That's why some of us are so passionate about this topic, and why we continue to talk about these things is because we are very passionate about you not wasting your time and you valuing your time and you valuing yourself. That's why I've made this deconstruction guide, to allow you to reassess yourself, to really do your own self-reflection on who you are and who you can already be, become aware of. Now, this will cause you to be persecuted because everybody else believes mostly in the same thing. Everybody believes mostly in God. And so you have to be that person to stand out. You are going to take a lot of, negative remarks and all these different things, right? You got to be prepared for that. You have to be prepared for that, especially if you want to be a content creator. You have to be prepared for that. If you are not prepared for that, they will eat you alive. So please be the light. Don't waste another second, going through the whole pace of it. And whenever you're persecuted, stand 10 toes down. But I have a surprise. I have a surprise. So I won't do a drum roll this time. But my surprise for you is simply none other than yours truly, your boy, have an ebook. That's right. I have an ebook coming out. This is going to be my first digital product in terms of like a book, that people can purchase and read. It's called Overcoming Christian Gaslighting, a guide for those deconstructing from religion. All right. That's the whole reason why I made this deconstruction guide, is basically kind of like a prequel to this book. Right. This book is going to go into the 10 rhetorics that Christians will try to tell you. It's going to tell you about the whole basis of the psychological aspect of Christian gaslighting. It's going to give you affirmations to affirm within yourself on who you can be, who you need to be, who you already are, to help you cope and pace with your internal thoughts and your internal emotions and all these other type of things, right? It's going to deal with how you can start more, of intellectual conversations with people who might differ from how you see life. And it's just going to be a really good deep dive on how you can overcome Christian gaslighting and how you can further deconstruct from religion and set yourself on the path to your spiritual journey, or just living life the way you want to. Okay. So this will be a grand book. It's going to be lit. I'm telling you. So you might ask, well, when is this book going to be published? Or like, when can I get my hands on this book? January 25th. All right. Which is merely a few days from now. So it's going to be on a Saturday. That is when the book will be out. You might ask, well, how do I get this book? Well, there are going to be two ways you can get this book, right? You got two options. Two. Not one, but two. So option one, you can give your life to Jesus. Option two, you can go to hell. No, I'm just playing. The true options, all right? I'm just kidding. Might be a joke that didn't go over, all right? But option one is that you can become a member, all right? Or rather, option one, you can buy it straight from the stand store when it comes out. After February 25th, it will be at its regular price, which is $20. So for the first month, you're going to have it at $10. So you can go straight to the stand store when it comes out and just buy the book like that, right? If you're watching this and it's already past January 25th, get your hands on that book. All right. Option two, you can become a member, right? So when you click on my stand store, that one right there, that's $6 a month. That is my membership. You can become a member. And I have another membership too, where I'm going to be helping people build their personal brands or their social media platforms and also teach them how to edit. So if you're a part of either or of those, or rather, if you're part of either one of those, you automatically will get the book, the digital product, for free, but you must be a member for at least 30 days. Okay. So after you become a member for at least 30 days, I will personally email you the book. All right. I will reach out to you and get you the book. So those are your two options. Either you can, buy it straight from the store, or you can become a member, wait 30 days, appreciate the valuable content that I'm giving in these memberships, and get the book on top of that for free. And this concludes our deconstruction guide. I love you. All right. That's exactly why I made this deconstruction guide. That's exactly why I made this ebook, is because I want to be of service to people who are currently going through what I am going through. And I feel like that I've been in this for so long, and I've studied this for so long, and experienced this for so long, even at my young age, that I want to take advantage of that. And I want to be of service to people who are near my age range, who might be in my generation, and maybe some people who are far above my generation. I want to be of service to people so that they can get through this, so that they can become the best aspects of themselves. And that's what I want to be of services for. So hopefully you got something very grand out of this deconstruction guide. If it's already past July, or excuse me, I don't know why I keep saying July. If it's already past January 25th, go into the description below and you can get your deconstruction guide book. All right, go to my stand store. You can become a member. The deconstruction guide. This book, this slideshow, not the presentation here, this will stay on YouTube, but the slideshow is free. That's the deconstruction guide slideshow. So you can get that for free. You can get this for free, even if you're not a member. You know, you can get this slideshow presentation for free. All right. Just so, you know, if you need that, if you want to go through these slides again and take your personal notes and just reaffirm certain things. So that is what that's going to be for. But hit this like button, share this with a few people so that they can personally deconstruct, or y'all can talk about it and y'all can have the conversation yourselves. And I will see you in the membership or in the next one.